is so much better than it used to be. I mean, I still I think I'm having problems and things are bad, but it's nothing compared to what it used to be. So I'm a lot happier now.
Come on. It's almost like he knows he's going to come on, Jane. Time to come down.
Parents, caretakers, and teachers often believe a child is being difficult just because they want to. But adults need to learn to ask themselves, why is this activity so hard for this child? What's getting in the child's way? What can I do to help?
Ross, have a sec? Sure.
Dr. Ross Greene and Dr. J. Stuart Ablon are the co-directors of the Center for Collaborative Problem Solving, located in Newton, Massachusetts.
The philosophy is children do well if they can. And that philosophy isn't earth-shattering unless you consider the conventional wisdom, which is children do well if they wanna. Because if a child isn't doing well because he doesn't wanna, I actually can only think of one thing for adults to do to the child: make him wanna. How do we do that? We reward and punish the child. Children do well if they can says if this child could do well, he would do well. Something must be getting in his way. We spend a great deal of time, first of all, believing that this child would do well if he could do well, and second, trying to figure out what it is that's interfering with the child doing well.
Children who have difficulty with flexibility and frustration tolerance often lack skills related to problem solving. Their difficulties with being flexible and tolerating frustration make life challenging for those who interact with them. Eric and Ruth Leibowitz know firsthand the challenges of having a child who has difficulties with flexibility and problem-solving skills. Their son, Gabriel, now 16, has difficulties in these areas.
Gabe had difficulties at school and at home. It was mostly inability to tolerate frustration that kind of went across the board in all areas. So that if you would ask him to do something, if that led to any frustration at all, there was always the potential for a meltdown. And that would happen at school as well. His stomach was always tied in a knot. Anytime we had to approach him to ask him something, the anxiety level, the adrenaline would just pump into our system because we didn't know what was going to happen. It was incredibly draining, depressing, exhausting, led to feelings of helplessness, hopelessness.
We never knew what could set off, upset or an explosion. Because, we discovered that life was full of constant transitions. And Gabe had a lot of trouble with that. So things that we would think would be perfectly innocent and perfectly natural, all of a sudden, boom.
Living with a child like this is extremely difficult. At the extreme, these are children who may be extremely aggressive physically and verbally. They may destroy things in the household. Even at the mild end, in our society, nothing is viewed more negatively than a parent with a child who isn't doing what he's told by a society that doesn't understand those children very well in the first place. So this can really be very demoralizing, very frustrating to the adults, very frustrating to the child himself.
Using the family computer was an area in Gabriel's life that was complicated for him by his difficulty with shifting gears and being flexible. When his parents insisted that he shut off the computer, he would often explode.
I would stay up late at night doing various things on the computer or sometimes playing video games.
Literally, when he says staying up, we're talking sometimes 2, 3 in the morning.
Pretty late.
And then not being able to get up for school the next day. And what occurred in those situations were, you'd think, well, you just tell your child to shut the computer off. And if they don't, you just shut it off for them, But that would lead to an absolute disaster.
We had various systems that we were working with, so we would have pieces in place to address it. Like, we would talk to Gabe before he got a new computer game or video game. We would try to, negotiate the the boundaries really clearly. You could watch and you could play until X time, and then he would be able to do that for a while, but then he would start stretching beyond, and then further and further and further. And if we were interrupting him when he was in the middle of something important, that would really set off a major explosion.
When children who have difficulty with flexibility and frustration tolerance go to school, teachers and school systems often find that having such a child in a classroom situation can be quite challenging.
Schools are big systems, and big systems have even more difficulty dealing with kids who fall outside the norm than little family systems do. And so this is the kid who's being sent out of the classroom a lot, sent to the assistant principal a lot, suspended, detention, expulsion a lot.
If you think about a school, detention, suspension, expulsion, all of these interventions are aimed at telling a kid, you better shape up. This is important, okay? There are going to be bad consequences if you don't start behaving properly. And when a kid is trying their utmost to behave properly, to stay in the class, to not explode, but can't do it, and we continue to say, yes, you can if you just try harder, eventually this kid's going to give up and just say, I guess I'm a bad kid. Everyone says I could do this if I tried harder. I'm trying my best and I don't seem to be able to.
Can I leave a mark on the world?
People at school thought he was being purposely defiant. I never thought that. Just something that he just needed to learn to control himself better. Something about some will or ability to control.
I remember in kindergarten, the first time we started getting feedback that there was something different. And it had to do with kind of going along with the group. Gabe had difficulty doing that. And also there was a lot of physical movement. He had hyperactivity that was really strong back then. So initially we thought he had ADHD, which in fact he does have, but that's not the main part of what's really been difficult for him. And in the school system, they were relating to the ADD a lot, and there were some good interventions with that. But this other thing, which has to do with the frustration tolerance and kind of organizing himself and being able to take things step by step in an orderly way. That was, I think, the biggest problem in school.
Gabriel's concrete, literal style of thinking caused him to be misunderstood at school.
I was sitting cross-legged, just legs crossed. And a teacher came over to me and told me to sit down. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Because as far as I knew, I was sitting. I said, sit down! What? And he didn't explain himself. He just, for a couple of minutes, he just kept yelling at me to sit down. And he thought I was being defiant or something. And eventually he just brought me to the principal's office.
Somebody tell me what
Teachers are often concerned about the message they are sending their other students if they do not punish a child for his or her behavior. They are afraid that the child and his or her classmates will think that this is acceptable behavior or that they can get away with it.
The truth of the matter is, number one, he wasn't interested in getting away with anything in the first place. And number two, if you fix the problem, if you figure out the cognitive skills this child is lacking and train them, and in the most elegant form of this model, get the other kids to help you do it, then you've solved the problem. And now this isn't a labor-intensive kid anymore. He's just part of your classroom.
Living without meltdowns is just a much better way to live. I would say it's like 95%, for me, it's about 95% gone. Whereas before it used to be 100% there. At any instant, it was just a given that on any day, at any moment, we were going to go into hell and stay there indefinitely.
If nothing else, Gabe still has difficulties and he still has things he has to work out, and we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what he's going to do with the rest of his life. I don't know what he's going to want to do and what he isn't going to want to. But if nothing else, our day-to-day living is filled with love for each other, appreciation for each other, instead of horror.